together, but then they die. They sink it tougher before we'll discover that each of us has their own rise. They sink it tougher before we'll discover that's how I feel about this right now. Holding on ya, holding on ya, holding on. One moment, one moment, one moment. In my mind, in my mind. One moment, I say that one moment, in this place. One moment, and one moment. Sometimes.
Hello and welcome to our webinar, Chef Talks. This is our third webinar since January at the Stratford Chef School. My name is Elizabeth Kerr. I am the Director of Marketing and Admissions Development, and I am thrilled to welcome all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. Today, as we take you through Chef Talks, we're going to be meeting three of our faculty members who are going to discuss topics that they are very well versed on. You will meet Eli Silverthorne, Erin Negus, and Mark Brown. As I mentioned, they are all faculty at our school, and I'm really proud to tell you today that they are also Stratford Chef School alumni. So let's get started with our webinar. We're going to take questions and give you answers today. And so if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice that there is a chat button and a question and answer button. We invite you to use both of those, and we'll be sure to record your questions and then answer them at the end of the webinar. So Eli, I'm going to start with you, the methodologies of cooking. Eli Silverthorne is a faculty member. He is an instructor of level 1 cookery. He has developed and runs our open kitchen classes. He runs his own business. He is a Red Seal chef. He is a remarkable man. Eli, I'm hoping that you can tell us a bit about yourself, your journey as a chef, and tell us about your formula for teaching level 1 cookery, the methodologies of cooking.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. So hello, welcome everybody. My name is Eli Silverthorne. Fitting that we lead here because here at the Chef School, I'm gonna be one of the first people that you meet here at the Chef School as I teach the practical cooking in level 1s. So just before we get started, speak about myself. I've always been somebody who's enjoyed cooking, enjoyed eating. When I started working in kitchens, even through high school, I found that even working in some elite kitchens, some of the breakdowns that I found was not with regards to the skill set of the chef, but their communications and their ability to translate their vision through their applied teams. I wanted to pursue culinary. I took some time off away from applied kitchens, spent some time working as an educational assistant at Fanshawe College, working on my own communication skills before coming to Stratford Chef School as an applicant and a student. That was about 7 years ago. Did well in the program. I really enjoyed both the program and the city of Stratford. Shortly after graduating the program, I worked with Jonathan Gushu at his restaurant in Berlin. Came back to the Stratford area as I really enjoy it. I've been teaching at the chef school in terms of the practical cookery and the apprentice program for about 6 years. And I've been designing and leading the open kitchen program for about 4 years from there. Just with regards to what we do at the chef school, a major focus of what I do, we are a classically trained institution. We are very French focused. We train the idea of recipes and palate development, but a major objective with what I want to accomplish in what I teach at the school is essentially to free you from recipes. What we do in terms of a modeling here at the chef school is that we teach these types of classical recipes and train your palate throughout the course, but we do so in a very trunicated model. So we only look at one applied cooking method at a time. We're going to be starting with things like boiling, where we're going to be looking at a very standardized temperature, a wet method. We can't burn things. We're going to be talking about all the different sciences with regards to the density of mediums and looking at that method cohesively before we start looking at some of the more nuanced applications of other wet-based methods, such as poaching or simmering. So the idea is that by looking at a range of recipes within a given subset of temperatures and applied methodologies, that not only are we teaching the recipes, but we're teaching the ins and outs of the science, so that by the end of the level one, and as we start progressing more into the professional world, we've essentially freed you up from the idea of being strung to a recipe, because now we understand the what and the why. Why am I using this protein in this method? And once we understand the whys, the food science, and really some of the chemical reactions that are applicable, we can move away from the recipes, move more to the idea of seasonality, start dealing with our producers and dealing what's coming out of their fields, and not necessarily, as I see it, see food as a problem where we have this in this recipe and this in this recipe, and we can start utilizing our skill set based on the foods that are around us and are provided to us from the farmers in the fields.
Thanks, Eli. And if I could just add, you've spent a fair bit of time writing the program for the methodologies of cooking. It's quite wonderful information.
That is correct. So what we do is we show the idea of practical recipes and the what's and the smells, the taste, those types of things. But a lot of the understanding of whys is largely theoretical. And there's a reason that we're wearing these white jackets. There is a fair amount of chemistry, biology, and these types of anatomy things that we need to understand. But in doing so, we can cook more cohesively and we can optimize results. So it is a bit laborious in doing so. For instance, it's always a work in progress where I'm updating these as I've created the science program largely from scratch, but just looking at the boiling chapter in terms of the level one methodology, that's currently sitting at about 26 pages. So we're looking at the idea of the different molecular densities, the reason why water's more effective at transferring heat than air, certain idea of temperature thresholds based on pressure above elevation. So we can see the idea of the difference between pressure cooking, boiling, and simmering, even within that very narrow subset of cooking at or above 212 degrees in a liquid environment.
Right, right. Well, I, as a graduate and having been taught by you, can attest that, yes, there are often 26 pages to learn on any given topic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eli.
So it is a bit of a rabbit hole as well. I'm not talking about the chemistry. You don't need applied prerequisite knowledge that way. But it is a bit of a rabbit hole that way. Once you get a bit of a taste of the understanding of what and why, This is a field that you can go in any different avenues: food science, food writing. So yeah, it doesn't require a chemistry prerequisite or a degree in that regards, but it does open up the boundaries with regard to what you can do as a chef, one, to understand the basics of it.
Right. Thanks, Eli. I know that we'll be coming back to you to ask a few questions. And now I would like to introduce everyone to Erin Negus, who is the proprietor of the Alchemy Bake Shop and is also an instructor, as I mentioned, at the school for level 1 pastry. And she also marks level 2 lab packages and internship summary reports. Erin is just full of joy in the school. I never had the opportunity to learn from Erin, but it is always wonderful to run across you, Erin. Erin, you're going to be talking about the science of baking. And in pastry, it is very important to follow the rules. It's not where you, as a new baker, you can really get creative and just haphazardly substitute ingredients. So after you tell us a bit about your culinary journey, I'm hoping that you can focus on giving us a few rules as to how to become better bakers and why it is that we need to follow all those instructions and rules. I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, again, like you said, I teach pastry level 1 at the Stratford Chef School. I also graduated from George Brown in their baking and pastry arts program. I've worked as a baker and a pastry chef for many years, and I started my own bakery business in 2019 with my partner. And we do a range of sort of products from savory to sweet, cookies and croissants and pies and lots of fun things. Sort of when I think about my passion for baking, I really think about sort of my mother, who was an incredible baker. And in that regard, I think of sort of the powerful and intrinsic connection that food brings to all people. And I just love the creativity and precision and diversity that baking sort of brings. When I think of this science of baking, it's really why I called my bakery Alchemy Bake Shop, because alchemy was an early form of science that people regarded as magic, where basic elements were combined and the sum of those ingredients were really remarkable and greater than the individual pieces themselves. So of course, when related to baking, I think about flour, sugar, butter, and those basic elements, when combined together, create magic and sort of magical items like pastries. But yeah, as you may know, we talked about baking is science, and it really speaks to a relationship among ingredients, where oftentimes there's a chemical reaction. And when we think of sort of baked goods, we think of baking powder, baking soda, basic elements that use as leavening agents. And those are really the chemical reactions that are formed as we use those ingredients. We think of the science behind sourdough bread and the process of using good bacteria to get the desired results in that perfect loaf. What really helps, I would say, when we sort of create baked goods or we do baking is knowledge and understanding of these ingredients and the role they play in the recipes that we use. It's the interrelatedness of those ingredients that really create sort of that magic. Not to mention that every time I pull out my scale, I really feel like a scientist doing a cool science experiment. So I would say, yeah, like recipes are intrinsically are intrinsically ratios. And so there's an integral relationship among the ingredients in those recipes, sort of a balance of elements that's necessary to sort of keep on track, so the recipe doesn't get out of whack, sort of, so to speak. Yeah.
Erin,
That's what I would say.
Erin, I wonder if I could ask you to explain the baker's percentage to the guests listening in.
Yeah, baker's percent. So it's sort of like a ratio or an equation where all of the elements in that recipe are all related to sort of the flour in the recipe, and all of the ingredients are measured in relation to that one ingredient. So again, like I said, they're ratios, they're percentages that are related to each other.
Right. I have a feeling that most everyone is a wannabe baker. And the reason I think that is because at the start of the pandemic in 2020, I did not know one person who wasn't trying to make sourdough bread. Did you encounter that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously baking has been around since sort of the dawn of humanity kind of thing. And a lot of the communities that we know today are sort of based and modeled off of communities where sort of in ancient times there was one baker for the whole town, for the whole city, so to speak, and everybody would bring their bread or their item to be cooked in that oven. So I think there's a real sense of community, and I think there's a real sense of history there, whereas a lot of our sort of communities today are based off of bakeries. Where everybody would be connected through one baker, and all of their food for that whole city or whole town would come through that one bakery, so to speak.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think there's an intrinsic connection that we all have to baking, and every community and every sort of culture in this world has their own specific baked goods or bread that has been around really since ancient times. So it has a long history that was really revived, I think, through the pandemic.
Do you have a special bread recipe that you make both in your bakery and at home, or is there a specific type of bread that you would recommend to someone just starting out, that they start with that type of bread?
That's a good question. Well, like at my bakery, we don't actually make a lot of bread products. We make a lot of baked goods and pastries. So in terms of, core recipes, I have ones that I've been using for many, many years, sort of probably even decades. When we talk about bread, there's a lot of good bread recipes out there. And a lot of it speaks to your success at having a great recipe, speaks to, I would say, like routine. So making that recipe over and over again, understanding that there's specific elements when you do bake that are environment specific. So even if you make one recipe in one place, you may go somewhere else and that recipe may not be the same. So in some respects, it's quite challenging because, as I said, the role of the ingredients and your understanding of those ingredients can play a large impact on your sort of end product. Like we talk about flour, protein content, that flour, while it's grown, can all have different protein contents or protein percentages in it. And then when you switch that out, that can have a large impact on the bread you make. Just for instance, as well as the oven that you use, the style of oven, that can have a very large impact on that recipe or on that loaf of bread that you make. So sometimes when you do one recipe, if it's not the exact same under the same conditions every time, you might not get the same desired results. So as I said, understanding the role of the ingredients as well as the environment that you bake in, that can play a large part in the success of your product.
And I suppose that is what you teach your level 1 students as their pastry instructor.
Yeah, exactly. And we're always in the same environment there. So sometimes I think it can be frustrating, especially if you don't have that background knowledge or that understanding of those ingredients, that when they go off and they go sort of to their home or to their workplace and try those recipes, that again, it's more like, as Eli mentioned, a method, you know, it's not always this recipe will work the same every single time. It has to be under the right conditions. The products have to be the exact same, or you're going to get different results. And sometimes like using that knowledge to tweak that recipe under different conditions can lead to more success.
That's wonderful advice, and it's great information, Erin. Again, we'll be coming back to you, but thank you for sharing so much about the science of baking.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. Thank you. And now, finally, we're going to hear from Mark Brown, co-founder of Lady Glaze Doughnuts. Mark is a business instructor at the school, and in fact, he was my business instructor. It's so nice to see you again, Mark.
Yeah, you too.
Now, we've got you here, and everyone can tell that you're outside. Mark is a very busy man, and we caught him halfway between one appointment and the next. And I'm pretty sure that your internet connection is fantastic. Mark, you're going to be talking about that entrepreneurial spirit. And I can't think of anyone better to talk about that topic than you. You co-founded Lady Glaze Doughnuts, and it's my understanding that it wasn't long before the pandemic hit that you actually founded and started Lady Glaze Doughnuts. You've had a resounding growth with the company, and we all just want to hear from you as to, well, what your culinary story is, but how did you know that you were an entrepreneur? What does it take? How long are your days? And what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, I can certainly try and cover all of those. So yeah, as she mentioned, I kind of got caught in a late meeting coming from Hamilton, heading back to our bakery. We've been open for coming up to 3 years, and kind of our benchmark is a new location every 6 months. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball right now. But we were looking at a spot in Hamilton to be able to expand the brand to that region. So I'm pretty excited that hopefully this will come to fruition. We've been looking in Hamilton for about a year now, but we are finally finding a great spot. So we started Lady Glaze Doughnuts back in 2019, which was actually 10 years after I graduated the Stratford Chef School. So I graduated in 2009. Similar to Eli, I left and worked for Jonathan Gushu. He was such a profound chef in our region, and I did my apprenticeship with him at Langdon Hall, and then went on to do sort of my professional pastry training with a chef that came from Copenhagen, and he was voted sort of in the Danish Food Guide as sort of the best desserts. And so learned an immense amount from him doing desserts, where he actually bought an entire barrel of sherry, and we shaved the barrel down to produce a sherry barrel ice cream, making desserts using beets and raspberries, one that emulated the forest floor. We did another one that looked as if it was a campfire. It smelled of a campfire. It had smoke, but it also included strange things from pastries, such as candied seaweed and stuff like that. So it's kind of where I got my start in the pastry realm. But my family has been an entrepreneurial family for as long as I can remember. The family business started delivering groceries actually as far back as 1922, and we still have the original truck that my great-great-grandfather bought and used, sort of thing. So it's kind of how I was brought up, and something that I'm never willing to, something that I try to impart onto the students, where the entrepreneurial spirit really just comes from that drive to service your community and the people that you meet every day and want to influence them through whatever product that you produce. In our case as chefs, it is something delicious. So the best thing about the Stratford Chef School is going kind of back to how Eli and Erin both talked about. It builds more or less an instinct in you on how to handle ingredients or approach something where I've done 3 different post-secondary programs ranging from universities to college to professional cookery. And you sit in a large lecture hall and you get a textbook that was printed who knows where, but at the Stratford Chef School, it's different. It goes a lot deeper than those traditional textbooks do that are just off the shelf. Pulling on the knowledge of our instructors where they are getting real world experience and updating the course material year after year after year, where I've seen professional cookery books where you go into some of the large colleges and it's the same material that was taught 10, 15 years ago. So that really helps drive the spirit of entrepreneurship amongst the students. And so I teach the level 2 course where it's a sort of a culmination of everything that you've learned and everything that's inspired you over 2 years. Is how can you take everything you've learned and distill that into something you can do as a career moving forward out of the chef school. So we take the first kind of 6 weeks and we do the finance of restaurants, where we teach you how to actually run a successful and profitable restaurant or food service operation. As the world has changed, we do focus quite a lot on whether it be an at-home business or a quick service. But we also do talk about the traditional fine dining, sit-down establishments. And we let sort of the students' interests guide them through the course. If you're interested in running a business doing just specifically charcuterie boards, or if you want to do a bakery, we've also had destination restaurants where students want to have a farm where they produce all the products that they use in the restaurant. Very similar to a Pearl Morissette model. But the idea is, again, you take these instincts and these foundations that have been built upon for the last 2 years, and you figure out what you want to do with them and what inspires you to get out of bed every day and put in those 15 to 20 hours a day just to make your business and your dreams sort of successful. And that's kind of what I try to distill into a course. I mean, I've been doing it now, I think 6 years, teaching this course at the chef school. And every year the students surprise me on sort of the ideas that they come up with in terms of what's inspired them over the 2 years of the chef school, whether it's been a specific course, a specific methodology, or an instructor that's come from overseas to kind of teach you what's happening in their countries, even before it becomes a trend and becomes a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, I've seen that with several chef school visitors over the last kind of decade. Is they come in and they're very unheard of, and within 4 to 5 years they're number 18 on the world's best restaurant list because of the knowledge and kind of the new way that they're approaching ingredients. I mean, we've seen it with Ben Shuri and Riccardo Caminini. We've done the menus from Noma when we brought Daniel Burns, who now has some great projects in Brooklyn. So that's kind of how I approach it, where it's not, again, a very rigid course where some of the other ones are, where they have to kind of get those fundamentals into you. We sort of take a more creative approach on, okay, you know it, but what are you going to do with it? And so that's exactly how I kind of got into Doughnuts. So going through the program and learning the fundamentals and the science of baking, I kind of took my career down the path of dough and dough consulting. So I've traveled all over, from Vancouver to Halifax to New York City to Rome, doing pizza primarily. And it wasn't until someone presented me with the challenge of doughnuts where I said, okay, well, it's a dough, let's treat it as such, and kind of got into the realm of more than just sort of pizza consulting, and ended up in the realm of doughnuts. And so my business partner at the time was a coffee producer, and for him it was vertical integration, where if I have a secondary product that I can sell more coffee, revenues go up. But since then, our donut product itself has kind of eclipsed the coffee, and that's no longer really part of the equation. We're now primarily focused on donuts. And so very similar to how the chef school teaches, we've approached our bakery where we find farm partners and we see what's new and what's out there. I mean, just this past weekend, we picked up another like 11 bushels of peaches, which will last us the week to just make peach fritters with. And we have a team of 3 people peeling and pitting peaches for 3 days just to kind of get that prepared. But we approach sort of pastry and high volume pastry in a way that most other bakeries do not. Most other bakeries would buy frozen peaches, chop it into their product and move it on, where we're very much about maintaining the craft of what we do even as we grow. So now we have a team of 4 pastry chefs, 5 overnight bakers, and a team of 8 glazers that work out of our central kind of commissary bakery to produce everything for our shops. And it allows us to kind of continually kind of push what we're doing, whether it be a savory donut, we've done a beaten goat cheese donut before, or new shapes or new flavors or things like that. Again, for us, the essence of what we do is that craft, and that's kind of instilled in the chef school in year 1. And it's just, what do you do with that to kind of create your own niche within the market? And that's what we do in the business of restaurants in level 2, when I'll get to see you.
Thanks, Mark. Now, we have visitors from all over Canada. Do you have any plans to expand Lady Glaze Donuts beyond Ontario?
It's tricky. Even as it is, we don't want to go further than an hour from our central bakery. So we kind of have to max out the bakery and decide if there's another location that would support us building another bakery. So the challenges we've had as we've grown, obviously in post-pandemic world, is staffing. And you hear it from every business, whether it's my brother who works in electrical engineering, to bakeries and restaurants, where it's being able to find skilled, qualified staff to kind of carry out your vision and move the business forward is extremely challenging. So for us, what we've done is we've centralized our strong team into one location. So every time we open a new one, I don't have to find a whole new team of glazers and bakers and pastry people. I just supplement into their team, and they have this great team above them that they can kind of continue to work and learn and grow as the business kind of expands. And then we're able to do it in one place and provide the team with the best equipment that we can possibly afford, again, rather than having to do it 5 times over in all these different cities. We have one central point that we know we can really dial in the consistency for our brand. So that's kind of how we've approached it. So not necessarily sure that outside Ontario is in our wheelhouse at the moment.
So what I'm hearing from you, Mark, is that although your growth has happened, in my mind, really quickly, in fact, from your perspective, it's very controlled.
Yes. So we always sort of take a step and we say, okay, well, if this is our next step, what will our one after that be? Because for us to find the right location, it's challenging. We're a donut shop, right? So we can't be going into these 2,000 square foot retail outlets in a strip plaza. It just doesn't give the feel that we want to the brand. So for us, we need to know that, okay, if we find the right location, can our bakery handle it if I sign a lease and we want to be open in 60 days sort of thing? So the bakery we've designed can actually handle up to 12,000 donuts a day. But right now our capacity only hits about 4,500. So we've already kind of known, okay, well, this is the future and how many we're comfortable producing out of here. So now let's just find outlets that we can kind of scale that team up and kind of hit our full potential with this bakery.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mark, for talking about your entrepreneurial spirit. We've all learned quite a bit, and it was wonderful that you could stop and present to us. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so now we're going to open the floor to questions. And I had a couple come in from people not online, but they're going to be watching afterwards. So I'm going to address those first. And this first question is, in fact, to all of our panelists. And given the news these days, there's lots of talk about the industry, the culinary industry being tired. And so the question is, what is your perspective, each of you, what is your perspective on the future of the industry? And I thought I would go back and start with Eli.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So the COVID pandemic has created a lot of challenges for pretty much every industry, and especially culinary and fine dining in particular. We've definitely come against a bit of a wall that way. So we've really had to adapt that way. That said, we aren't reinventing what we're doing at the chef school. We were actually in a very good position with what we do here at the chef school. We've always been looking to train the chefs or the apprentices that are essentially going to be the cream of the crop and rising to the supervisory or managerial positions in their given establishments. And what we see in both the terms of either with restrictions of space in restaurants and with the current labor market, that the employers are simply looking for a multi-skilled disciplinary skill set from their apprentices and their employees. And that's exactly what we're offering. So in terms of the apprentices that are coming out, they're entering a labor market where they can, our students have always been a bit more selective or had the opportunity to choose where they'd like to develop their career. This is facilitating that even more. We're providing the skill set that will allow them to go where they want. And because businesses are looking at getting more out of fewer individuals, we provide exactly that to both the individual employee and exactly what the employer is looking for at the same time.
Thanks, Eli. Erin, maybe you could share your perspective.
Yeah, I would say the culinary industry is a huge industry. On a basic level, every human being eats food, and lots of them prefer to go out and buy food. A lot of people are looking for different ways to sort of reduce their cooking at home sort of thing. And that, I think, opens up a lot of doors. From a business perspective, I would say adaptability, like Eli said, is key. There's always going to be food trends, but everybody eats sort of thing. So I would say, yeah, the industry is ever evolving and ever growing. And in terms of tiredness, I would say, yeah, looking to reinvent and adapt in certain ways is sort of a great start from a business perspective. But also people like what they like, and sort of the individual industries, like in my case, the cookie industry or the laminated dough industry, like those are ever evolving, and lots of times getting in front of sort of a captive audience is sort of key. And there's always those captive audiences. Right. So it's a very large industry is right. What I would say.
Thanks, Erin. Mark, how do you see the industry moving forward?
Not to play a bit more of like the harsher on the side of this, but kind of how I've seen it in some of the articles that I've read and some of the things that I've shared with the students in the course is that it's not necessarily that it's an overarching labor problem within kind of Canada. It's that people without the right skill set are getting into hospitality or opening restaurants just because they can. I mean, you hear about it all the time where a lawyer or a dentist opens this or that because he wants to have a restaurant and kind of show his friends kind of what he's done sort of thing. But the know-how is not necessarily there. So I remember a few years ago that I actually did a graduate profile for the chef school, and we looked at all of the graduates to date that had left the school, and majority of our graduates are still within the hospitality realm, which is crazy when you look at a school such as ours that in 25 years graduates what George Brown does in one semester. So again, it doesn't necessarily speak to the school pumping out volumes of people just to put graduates through. Like, we're preparing our graduates to be successful within the realm of hospitality. So, I mean, the pandemic has shifted things, and yes, unfortunately, restaurants have closed and people are losing money that way. But I think that it's also starting to narrow the pool to being what works and what's successful, and perhaps having people second think, oh, should I put some of my retirement savings into this if I'm a dentist or a doctor? And I don't necessarily know it. I mean, I saw it all the time consulting for pizza, because again, pizza is one of the things that everybody's like, oh, let's put pizza on the menu. And as sort of Erin's mentioned, like, you can do a recipe one time in one location and then you take it to another location and it doesn't work the same. There's so many environmental factors to consider, and people just don't know that. So I find that it's as some restaurants are dropping off, that the labor pool is becoming a little bit better, because I mean, there's not as much competition pulling. And I mean, I saw it coming up through the ranks of restaurants where you would finish an apprenticeship like at somewhere like Langdon Hall, and you apply to a place where you're like, okay, well, I want to continue my learning, and you apply to a restaurant. They're like, oh no, like you're going to be a sous chef. And you're like, no, like I've got a year and a half of experience, sort of thing. And like, yeah, but the money's better. Like jump into the role, and then people are jumping kind of past that learning stage, sort of thing. So I'm hoping with sort of the slowdown in terms of the plethora of restaurants, we can start to actually see more qualified candidates spending the time to learn the skills and practice them time after time after time. And I mean, it's the repetition that makes it a stronger skill. And so that's kind of where I circle back to Stratford in terms of how much time we spend on a specific skill. Where I've had people come in and I'm like, oh, like, okay, like, have you ever done this before? And they were the baking program from a different sort of culinary institute. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw it once. Okay. And so now it's like a primary cornerstone of something that they should know as a working professional. And they've done it once in a 2-year career, sort of thing. So it's definitely a change to see what kind of Stratford does for those graduates. And again, you do a skill and you reinforce it over and over and over and over again until it becomes that second nature. And as Eli said, it kind of puts you at the cream of the crop of candidates that are out there in the culinary world. So let's continue to kind of push those people out of the chef school, so that way we can continue to build a stronger kind of hospitality sort of realm within Ontario and Canada.
Thanks, Mark. Very well said. Now I have a question for Eli. And Eli, the question is, why do I need to go to level 2 if you are teaching me how to cook in level 1? Don't I learn everything through those methodology classes?
I'll tell you that I, as an individual, none of the instructors here have finished learning their process. This is an industry that we're constantly evolving and pushing boundaries. Although the standard rate of boil is a constant, okay? The amount that you're going to be developing new ingredients, using them in a different way. By no means have we taught everybody that there is to know of cooking in the level 2 program. What we want to do is provide the foundations, and that's what level 1 does. In level 2, they're going to be taking that to the next level, in that they're going to be working and serving to the public while still under the guidance and tutelage of our chef instructors. We're then taking that foundational understanding and mixing it with real world scenarios. We're going to be tying them with cutting edge menus, leading world restaurants, cutting edge equipment here. And now we're connecting the dots between the fundamentals of cooking, what we're doing in current restaurants today. And there's a bit of a gap there where we're connecting those, and you're going to continue to connect those every single day in the professional realm of cookery.
Thanks, Eli. Erin, somebody wants to know here, when you look at a recipe online, are you able to tell if there's just something really wrong with it before you start, or is it obvious what's wrong with a recipe if there's a typo?
That's a great question. Yeah, when I look at recipes online or how I approach a new recipe, I often use compare and contrast. So I personally have an understanding of how much a volume measure is in comparison to a gram measure. So I personally would convert all of those volume measurements to weight measurements, and then I would compare and contrast those weight measurements with other recipes to really understand, like we talked about, baker's percent, because as we know, they're all ratios. So using that basic understanding and knowledge of these sort of ratioed recipes, you can really see the differences between the amounts of ingredients used. So then compare and contrast to maybe a recipe that I know is tried and true, and then working through the recipe as such, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, Erin. Thank you. Mark, there's a question for you that came in over the weekend from a friend of mine who is a big fan of your product in Waterloo. And they want to understand and know Do you have a design team that works on your donuts as well? I'm just going to give everyone a bit of background. Your product is not only quite delicious, but very beautiful as well on a continuous basis.
No, actually, it is the team of all of the sort of leaders that I have. So I've got a production lead who takes care of glazing. We have our pastry lead and we have our bakery lead. So even as right now, we're working on the October menu. We try to have our menus prepared sort of 30 days in advance, and we make them over and over and over again to test our glaze temperatures, to test our sugar content of our glazes, to know that they're going to shell accurately. And as we make them, we just start to say, are we falling in love with how this looks? Does it kind of hit those things? Is it bright, or are we looking for classic on this? Are we looking for a specific texture? And we'll constantly just tweak how they look. And that'll usually take about 3 weeks. And then we're ready kind of for any photos that we take for them. But yeah, we just, we make them over and over again. And it's just the team of chefs that we have with us.
Practice, practice, practice. Okay, well, Eli, Erin, and Mark, I can't thank you enough for joining me today for our first Chef Talks webinar. You've all given us so much information and lots to think about. To everyone who showed up to view our webinar, I also want to thank you for attending. It's been wonderful to arrange this for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope you'll come back for Chef Talks 2. It's on September 12th at noon hour again. And we'll be talking about the character of a chef. It takes more than knife skills and tough choices for a thoughtful chef. So we'll be sending you the registration information for that next webinar. But once again, I want to thank Eli, Erin, and Mark for joining me today.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Take care.
Thanks.
each other, craving this other, then they die. They sing it tougher for what they discover, and each of us has their own rise. They sing it tougher.